Welcome GRD132 Typography 1 to ex12. This is going to focus on typography for the web. We're also going to do some responsive web design. Sometimes you'll see RWD, but it's responsive. And what that means is we're going to set up a nice kind of organized looking bit of typography here with a headline, subheadline, kind of an intro paragraph, some body copy, and then we're going to make sure we have nice margin on either side. We're going to use relative units, meaning we're going to make sure that when we resize it, it changes with the window. So instead of just making it one single length, when the window gets smaller, you could see there's a percentage being used. So the margins get smaller, or they don't get smaller, but the line lengths get smaller because they're a certain percentage of the window. And then we're even going to do something where when it gets too small, and we don't need a lot of margin on either side, we're going to take away some of the margin, and then eventually when it gets to be a size maybe for like phones, we're going to completely get rid of the larger margin, maybe half of what we originally had. So we're going to adjust our margins as we go so they adapt to the particular device they're on. So that's good typography for digital devices. That's what we're going to focus on. So again, when it starts out on a web page, we're going to make sure we have nice short line lengths, everything we learned about with readability. And then once we start resizing the window, not that everybody sits here and resizes a window, but if they're on a tablet or something, and it's something like that, you'll have a little less margin when you're reading it on a tablet. If you look at this as like a tablet size, and then eventually when you're on a phone, you even have less margin here and you have more room to read because we're now in a vertical format and the line lengths are small anyway, since you're not reading it on a wide device. So that's what we're going to focus on. So I just wanted to show you the finished product here. Not a whole lot to do. We use Google Fonts. We use Roboto slab here, a nice big 900 heavy kind of slab. We'll use regular Roboto and even a lighter version. This is a little lighter, like a 300 weight here. And I even repeated the Roboto slab here, but not quite as heavy, and also in a brownish kind of color, kind of a warm, because we're using a warm, creamy background. So we're using blue to contrast, getting that warm, cool contrast. And then we're kind of using Unity here a little bit, taking that same warm color and getting a dark version of it here. So we have a nice contrast going on, nice fonts that kind of contrast with each other, nice readability. We have our line length spread out a little bit. So we're just focusing on good typography here for the web. So that's what we're going to be doing. So let me just show you what's here. This looks like a lot of HTML, and you're going to do this from scratch, and it's going to be really quick and really easy to do with our Emmet shortcuts, because there's this Lorem Ipsum copy that's just kind of like filler copy that you can just type in there and just indicate how many words they should be. So that's really easy to do. We're also going to introduce classes where this paragraph is going to be an intro class and this paragraph is going to be a body class, meaning, you know, just how we're kind of identifying them, because they're different kinds of paragraphs. So we're going to just give them special little names, and our H1s, H2s don't need any special names. We're still going to use an external style sheet, and we're still going to bring in our Google Fonts. I don't need this anymore. When I copied in the font families from Google Fonts, I put them here so we could kind of use them. And we're still going to do our reset. We're going to target body, H1, our intro paragraph, our H2, our body paragraph. So just our text and just a couple different declarations for each. And then at the end, we're going to do something called responsive design, where we're going to use media queries. And you can see one here is for 800 pixels and down, and this is for 580 pixels and down, and it's just adjusting the margin. That's all it's doing here, because in terms of margin, we're using an auto margin, but we're just adjusting the width of body, the width of our body copy. So that's why it's going from 70% to then to 85%. So that's what's happening here. It's 60%, and then at one point it's going to go down to like 70%, and then when it gets smaller, it goes down to 85%. So that means instead of adjusting the margin, we're just adjusting the width. So the width is 85% of the page here, it's 70% of the page here, and it's 60% of the page here. So it's always relative. And we're even going to use units such as percents. We're going to use M's, which are like percents. If you think of 1.2, it's like 120%. 1 M is the original size of the pixels on the page, which is like 16 pixels. So it's starting from the default. So 1 M is the default. So we're going to kind of go from there. And that's what we're going to do with relative units. So that's all we're going to do. It won't take that long. We don't have a lot here. We're not going to put in pictures. We're just going to make a nice, good-looking typographical web page that responds to the different widths of the window. So let's get started. So to get started from scratch, if you come into your home page in Replit, You don't even have to go to your repels. We're going to start a brand new one. So you can go to create, you can go to repels here, and I think they have a button up here to create a new repel, or you could just go to create. And when it comes up, you want to make sure it has HTML, CSS, JS. So if you don't see that, type it in. If you're seeing something else, type it in. But if you see it, just click on that and give it a name right away. That way you don't have to worry about changing it later. Just call it 12 dash and just call it Web Type RWD. And then put a dash and put your last name first initial. You could do that. So just Web Type RWD, even if you just did 12 RWD, it doesn't matter. As long as I could identify it as yours, if I fork it into my account, then they don't all have the same name. So that's all you got to do. So now it's named. Your repel is named. Make sure it's HTML and hit Create Repel. And don't worry about this. This shows up sometimes because we're working online, that'll update. So just wait a little bit. Failed to connect, retrying. It'll come back. Okay, now it says connected. Now this thing right away, you can open this up in a new tab because we don't need to do anything. Now there's nothing going to be there except hello world, and I'll just move this over. I don't even need to see that. And you're going to have index, script.js, and style.css. Now what you can do first is just get rid of this hello world and the script lines 10 and 11, just delete. We don't need them. We're not going to use any JavaScript. And leave it empty there because we're going to put stuff in body. And then also you can go up here to this script.js. We don't need that, so go on the three dots and just hit delete and hit OK if it asks you to confirm it. And also what we could do, this is just a thing that I like calling it styles.css. You can leave it style, but you can go here and put an S for styles. Now if you do that, make sure you rename this one and go to rename and name that styles. Now you don't have to do that, but I like to do that, so I'm going to call that styles. I'll hit enter. So now that is pointing to that file. Okay, and one other thing I like to do, this isn't that big of a deal, but remember in your settings, if we have our indent type set to tabs and our indent size is 4, when it comes up by default, it's not necessarily there. So what I like to do is just go here and tab in, and then I'll go here and I'll tab in, and I'll tab in all these things that are under head. It just makes them line up a little easier. Here's HTML lined up, and the next tab in is head is lined up. Body is going to be at the same distance, so you can move that over. And if it ever goes too far, just backspace. So body and head, one's not inside the other. They're just kind of after each other. So in the HTML, everything's inside of HTML. This is a declaration, so it doesn't have closing tags. It's just kind of a declaration saying it's HTML5. Then we have our opening, closing HTML, opening, closing head tags where there's nothing really visual in there except this name, this title here, and you could just put in ex12, and you could even put your last name or something in there just so I identify it when I see it. So that's all you need there. And then this is the link to your, here's files. This is your link to your CSS. So that's all you need in there. And this is actually for responsive design, so that can stay in here. And that's all you need. These are your character sets. So everything's in there that you need. We just have no visual content in here yet, and that's what we're going to do first. So remember from our sample, we just had a headline. So I'll just start here and put a headline. And I'll hit return, and we can use our Emmet shortcut, and you can just type H1, and then hit your tab key. Look at that. It made our opening and closing H1 tags, and in here, I'm just going to put main headline. We're just kind of making this like a template, so we're not putting anything about Pilsner or anything like that. So there's our main headline. So if you went here and refreshed it, it has main headline. And notice it's in a default kind of Times font. We'll change all that. And then we're going to put a paragraph. So I'm going to hit return, and I'll type p.intro. I'm going to give it a special name. Now I'm just typing p.intro. I'm not using less than, greater than signs. I'm just typing the word because this is the way the shortcut works. It's called Emmet. And then if you hit tab, it should make your opening p tag and your closing p tag. And your opening p tag will have class equals intro because that's identifying that paragraph especially as the name intro. So we can use that and target that particular paragraph. And what we're going to do while the cursor's still blinking in there is you're going to type lorem, L-O-R-E-M, and just put something like 35. That means 35 words, and then just hit tab. Now, if you have any problem with that, just backspace and try it again. Sometimes if you put an extra space in there or you do it twice, it doesn't work. So, if I went here and I screwed it up or whatever, if I clicked out, I could click in and just type lorem 35 and hit tab. and there it is. And there's our paragraph if I refresh. And again, it looks very small right now, but it's going to be bigger. It's going to be kind of like an intro paragraph. So it won't be body copy. It'll be like an intro, kind of sort of a subheadline, but not really a subheadline, kind of like a description kind of thing. So we'll keep that there. And then what we're going to do is have two H2s. So we're going to do H2. And remember, you could just do H2 tab. And then in here, I'll just put subheadline 1. Just nothing exciting, subheadline 1. And then I'll do a P. I'll do P dot. Now, I probably shouldn't use body because it's an element. I don't want to be confused with that. I'll just put BDY. I'll just do BDY. And I'll hit tab. Now, you might think, well, is it going to know what that is? When I hit tab, it knows to make that a class name. So I'll just call that BDY for body copy. I just don't want to repeat the element and have any confusion with the element because it's a class name. It's a special name. So I'll just call it BDY. And inside here, I'll just do lorem again. We'll just put in some filler copy and I'll do like 40, make it a little bigger paragraph, and then hit tab, and there it is. And now you could copy this again, but I'm just going to do it because it doesn't take long. I'll do H2, and notice I'm hitting return here and it's lining up inside here, and I'll do H2 tab, and I don't have to give a special name for H2 because they're just going to be only an H1 and H2. They're not special. And I'll call this subheadline 2. And then after this, after the headline, I'll put P dot, and I'll use the same name, BDY, because they're going to be exactly the same in terms of their formatting. And I'll just hit tab. So they're going to share the same class, meaning the same formatting. They'll both have body class formatting. And then inside here, maybe I'll do like lorem 45. I'll make it a little longer, lorem 45, and I'll hit tab. And that's it. That's our content for the page. And I'll refresh it. And there it goes. Finally comes. And remember, default HTML kind of fills the container of the window. It has default space of above and below paragraphs and headlines and all that kind of stuff. It has a little bit of a margin around. We're going to adjust all that. And we're going to do that with CSS. And actually, the last thing I'll do here before we take a break is I'll go into my styles.css and let's just wipe out all that default space. And if you remember from the last exercise, ex11, we used an asterisk. It's like a wildcard. And then we use these curly braces. And we hit enter, and it indents here. And I'll just do margin. Now, margin does come up. Some of our autocomplete is not working ever since they updated Replit. But margin's working. If it's one word, they're working. And I'll do a colon. And remember, that's how we do a property and a colon, and then whatever our value is. Now, we don't have to put a space, or you can. You could put a space 0, but you must finish it off with a semicolon. I mean, you don't have to, but you're going to have problems if you don't. So I'll do that, and I'll also do padding. There's padding coming up, and colon, and I'll do space 0 just to keep it consistent. And that's it. Now, if I come here and I refresh it, it's just going to wipe out all that spacing. Notice there's no margin, there's no space before and below, all that kind of stuff. Now, we're going to tackle our CSS a little bit more in part 2. One thing we're going to do, instead of just putting a margin all around it and a margin on the right and left, we're just going to adjust our width of body, the width of body, and just say make it 60% of our window. And then we can even adjust that as the window gets smaller if we need to. So that's called responsive, and we're going to do that next. So I'm going to stop here. You don't have to save or anything. It's already saved. So we have all our content done here. That didn't take long at all using the lorem shortcut with Emmet. It's the Emmet shortcut, but lorem actually makes kind of filler copy there. And it helped us write our tags. So we wrote all this HTML without having to do a whole lot. And then we started our CSS. This was just a reset. Next, what we'll do is we'll target body. We'll target our H1, our P intro, our P buddy, body, and our H2s. And then we'll put in some responsive design in part 2.